the Great Flood evidence. Scientists tried to ignore. The first sign was not the rain, it was the sound, a deep vibration rolling beneath the earth like the planet itself had begun to tear apart. Birds exploded into the sky without direction. Entire forests bent violently in the wind. Animals fled toward higher ground while distant horizons darkened beneath towering walls of clouds no human being had ever seen before. Then the oceans began to move, not like waves, like continents of water rising against the world. Imagine standing beside the shore thousands of years ago and watching the sea suddenly pull backward for miles, exposing the skeleton of the ocean floor. Fish twisting in the mud, ships collapsing sideways, silence spreading across the coastline. And then, in the distance, something impossible appearing on the horizon. A wall of black water so massive it seemed to swallow the sky itself. People ran, cities vanished. Entire civilizations disappeared beneath roaring oceans and collapsing earth while lightning split the heavens above them. The ground shook, mountains fractured, rivers reversed direction. Day turned into darkness as ash and storms consumed the atmosphere. For the survivors, the world they knew ended in a single generation. And yet, humanity never forgot. For thousands of years, cultures separated by oceans, languages, and continents all preserved the same terrifying memory: a great flood, a punishment from the heavens, a time when the sea rose and nearly erased mankind from existence. Historians called them myths, legends, religious metaphors invented by primitive civilizations trying to explain natural disasters. But then modern science began uncovering things that should not exist. Whale fossils high in mountain ranges, ancient seabeds lifted thousands of feet above sea level, gigantic scars across entire landscapes that looked as if unimaginable torrents of water had ripped through them with catastrophic force. Then came the underwater discoveries. Entire ruins submerged beneath the ocean floor, lost settlements drowned by rising seas, structures older than recorded history hidden beneath dark water as though an ancient world had been swallowed whole. And suddenly, a disturbing question emerged. What if the flood story survived because something real happened? What if ancient humanity witnessed a catastrophe so enormous that fragments of the memory spread across the world and survived thousands of years through oral tradition, religion, and myth? Because the deeper researchers looked into Earth's past, the stranger the evidence became. The strange memory. Every civilization shares. Long before modern science tried to explain the past, humanity was already telling the same terrifying story. Not one civilization, not one religion, entire cultures separated by oceans and continents preserved memories of a catastrophic flood that nearly erased mankind from existence. In ancient Mesopotamia, clay tablets described a divine flood sent to destroy civilization. In India, sacred traditions spoke of waters swallowing the world. In China, legends told of unstoppable floods that devastated entire kingdoms. Across the Americas, tribes passed down stories of rising seas, black skies, and desperate survivors escaping destruction. Even isolated Aboriginal traditions in Australia carried memories of coastlines disappearing beneath the ocean. The similarities were deeply unsettling. Most ancient myths remain local, tied to one people or region. But flood stories appeared almost everywhere, carrying the same core elements: a warning, a great destruction, a small group of survivors, the collapse of the old world and the beginning of a new one. The Greeks told of Deucalion surviving Zeus's flood. The Maya described earlier creations of humanity being wiped away by water. Norse traditions spoke of catastrophic floods destroying entire races before the rise of a new age. Again and again, humanity repeated the same nightmare as if the memory itself refused to die. For centuries, historians dismissed these stories as symbolic myths, created by primitive civilizations attempting to explain ordinary natural disasters. That explanation sounded convincing until researchers began comparing the details more carefully. These ancient accounts did not describe normal river floods or seasonal storms. They described chaos on a scale almost impossible to imagine. Oceans invading the land, earthquakes shaking the world, darkness covering the sky, entire populations vanishing beneath rising waters. Some legends even described changes in climate and stars after the catastrophe, as though the disaster transformed the world itself. Then another disturbing realization emerged. Some of these stories might be far older than written language. Before books, nations, and empires existed, humanity relied on oral tradition to preserve memory. The most traumatic events were repeated generation after generation because survival depended on remembering them. Ancient people remembered where the waters came from, which lands disappeared beneath the sea, and which mountains remained above the flood. Over thousands of years, facts became symbols, symbols became myths, and myths became sacred history. But buried inside those stories, fragments of something real may have survived. Modern archaeology began making the mystery even stranger. Coastlines described in ancient oral traditions were eventually discovered underwater. Lands remembered by indigenous cultures truly had vanished beneath rising seas near the end of the Ice Age. In some regions, myths once considered fantasy suddenly aligned with geological evidence. The deeper researchers looked, the harder it became to completely dismiss the possibility that humanity was preserving echoes of a real prehistoric catastrophe. And if civilizations across the planet truly inherited memories of the same ancient disaster, then one terrifying possibility emerges from the darkness of history. Maybe the flood story survived because the event survived. But stories alone are not enough to convince the modern world. Legends can be doubted. Myths can be explained away, until the Earth itself begins revealing scars that seem to tell the exact same story. The ocean that should not exist. The deeper scientists explored the planet, the more they discovered something profoundly disturbing. Earth looked less like a stable world shaped slowly over millions of years, and more like a planet carrying scars from violent catastrophes. Some of the strangest evidence appeared in places where oceans should never have existed. High in the Himalayas, near the peak of Mount Everest itself, researchers found marine fossils embedded in solid rock. Sea creatures, shells, and ancient ocean sediment resting thousands of feet above sea level. In the driest deserts on Earth, scientists uncovered traces of ancient seabeds filled with the remains of marine life, as though entire oceans had once covered regions now consumed by sand and stone. At first glance, geology explains these discoveries through tectonic movement and continental uplift over immense spans of time. Mountains rise, oceans retreat, continents shift. But some researchers became fascinated by another possibility hidden beneath the accepted explanations. Certain rock formations and sediment layers appeared strangely chaotic, as if enormous amounts of water and debris had been deposited with catastrophic force rather than through slow, natural accumulation. Massive layers of sediment stretched across entire continents, like fingerprints left behind by ancient floods, too large for modern civilization to comprehend. Then came the erosion patterns. Satellite imagery began revealing gigantic scars carved into the earth with astonishing violence. Vast canyons, deep channels, and strange ripple formations larger than cities appeared across landscapes around the world. Some formations looked less like the result of slow erosion and more like the aftermath of unimaginable torrents ripping through the land at incredible speed. Entire valleys seemed violently stripped bare, as though walls of water had surged across the surface of the planet with unstoppable force. One of the most unsettling discoveries involved enormous boulders scattered far from their geological origin. Rocks weighing hundreds of tons rested in locations where they should not exist, as though some immense force had lifted and thrown them across great distances. In several regions, layers of mixed sediment contained sea life, plants, animals, and debris tangled together in chaotic disorder. The planet did not look peaceful. In some places, it looked shattered. What made these discoveries even more controversial was not the evidence itself, but what it implied. For generations, mainstream geology favored gradual change over catastrophic destruction. The dominant belief held that Earth's features formed slowly over unimaginable stretches of time. But the more evidence accumulated, the harder it became to ignore signs that sudden disasters had also shaped the planet's history. The idea of catastrophic flooding was no longer confined to ancient mythology. Fragments of it were beginning to appear in the geological record itself. And then scientists uncovered something even more extraordinary. Entire landscapes that appeared violently carved in days rather than centuries. Evidence of floods so massive they reshaped regions larger than modern nations. Discoveries so extreme that they forced parts of the scientific world to reconsider whether Earth's past had been far more chaotic than anyone once believed. The megafloods that rewrote geology. For decades, the scientific world rejected the idea that gigantic floods could rapidly reshape the Earth. Catastrophes belonged to mythology, not geology. Most experts believed mountains, valleys, and canyons formed through slow processes acting over millions of years. Then researchers discovered a landscape so strange, so violently scarred, that the old explanations began to collapse. In the northwestern United States, enormous barren regions known as the channeled scablands stretched across the land like the remains of a destroyed world. Giant dry waterfalls towered over empty plains. Deep channels cut through solid rock. Ripple marks the size of skyscrapers scarred the ground as though impossible torrents had once thundered through the region. When geologist J. Harlan Bretz first proposed that a massive flood created these formations, the scientific community mocked him. His theory sounded too catastrophic, too extreme, too close to ancient flood mythology. But Bretz refused to back down. The evidence was overwhelming. Normal rivers could not have carved landscapes on such a colossal scale. Eventually, scientists uncovered the missing piece of the mystery. At the end of the last ice age, a gigantic glacial lake known as Lake Missoula repeatedly collapsed when ice dams failed, unleashing walls of water across the land with unimaginable force. The numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. Entire lakes emptied in days. Floodwaters surged at highway speeds. Some waves reached heights comparable to modern skyscrapers while carrying boulders, sediment, and debris across hundreds of miles. These megafloods reshaped entire regions in catastrophic bursts of destruction. Suddenly, the scientific world faced an uncomfortable reality. Earth had experienced floods far beyond anything modern civilization had ever witnessed. And the scablands were not unique. Evidence of ancient megafloods began appearing around the world. In Siberia, enormous flood channels hinted at catastrophic glacial collapses. In Europe, researchers found signs of massive floods linked to melting ice sheets and rising seas. Beneath the English Channel, scientists discovered evidence suggesting Britain may once have been violently separated from mainland Europe by colossal flood events. Again and again, geology revealed traces of sudden destruction powerful enough to transform continents. This discovery changed more than scientific theories. It changed the psychological barrier surrounding catastrophe itself. For generations, many researchers resisted ideas associated with ancient flood legends because they sounded exaggerated or unscientific. But now, the Earth itself proved that unimaginable floods were not fantasy. They were real events capable of reshaping landscapes with terrifying speed and force. The old belief that all geological change must happen slowly no longer fully matched the evidence buried beneath the surface of the planet. And once scientists accepted that regional megafloods truly occurred, a far more unsettling question emerged. If enormous catastrophic floods repeatedly struck Earth in the distant past, could ancient humanity have witnessed something even larger? Could fragments of those disasters have survived inside the flood stories passed down across civilizations for thousands of years? The forgotten world beneath the oceans. At the end of the last ice age, the world looked completely different. Vast stretches of land that now lie beneath the ocean once supported forests, rivers, animals, and human communities. The coastlines modern civilization takes for granted did not exist yet. Sea levels were dramatically lower, exposing enormous regions where ancient people hunted, built settlements, and raised families. Then the ice began to melt, not slowly enough for generations to comfortably adapt. In some periods, the oceans rose with shocking speed. Entire coastlines disappeared beneath advancing water while ancient populations were forced to retreat inland. To those witnessing it, the sea must have seemed alive, consuming the world piece by piece. Modern researchers now believe many prehistoric communities watched their homelands vanish forever beneath rising oceans. And in recent decades, scientists have started uncovering evidence that those lost worlds may still exist underwater. One of the most haunting examples lies beneath the North Sea. Thousands of years ago, a massive landmass known today as Doggerland connected Britain to mainland Europe. It was once filled with forests, rivers, wildlife, and human settlements. Archaeologists discovered tools, bones, and traces of ancient life buried beneath the seabed, proving that an entire inhabited world now rests underwater. For prehistoric communities living there, the rising ocean was not a distant threat. It was a slow-moving apocalypse, swallowing their homeland generation after generation. Farther east, off the coast of India, underwater structures near the ancient city of Dwarka sparked intense fascination and debate. Some researchers believe submerged ruins in the region may preserve traces of extremely old coastal settlements consumed by rising seas thousands of years ago. Near Japan, the mysterious Yonaguni formations continue to divide experts. Some see natural rock formations shaped by erosion. Others believe portions appear strikingly artificial, resembling staircases, terraces, and massive carved structures hidden beneath the ocean. Whether natural or man-made, the images themselves are deeply unsettling. Entire landscapes now rest in silence beneath dark water. These discoveries transformed the flood narrative from mythology into something deeply human. Suddenly, ancient stories about drowned civilizations no longer felt impossible. Humanity truly did witness the destruction of coastlines, villages, and entire regions at the end of the Ice Age. The survivors carried those memories into the future, passing them through generations until history and myth became intertwined. What later civilizations described as the world drowning may have originated from real experiences of catastrophic environmental collapse. And as researchers continued exploring submerged landscapes around the world, another terrifying possibility emerged. Some scientists began wondering whether one specific flood event, violent enough to destroy entire communities in a single catastrophe, might have become the origin of the greatest flood legends ever told. The Black Sea Theory. In the late 20th century, two researchers proposed a theory so dramatic that it immediately ignited controversy across the scientific world. According to their hypothesis, the Black Sea was once an isolated freshwater lake surrounded by thriving human settlements. Then, sometime near the end of the last ice age, the Mediterranean Sea violently breached the natural barrier separating the two bodies of water. What followed may have been one of the most terrifying floods ancient humans ever witnessed. Imagine the moment it began. A roaring wall of seawater exploding through the narrow land barrier with unstoppable force. Entire valleys collapsing beneath violent currents. Freshwater transforming into saltwater as villages near the shoreline disappeared beneath rising waves. Some estimates suggested the floodwaters may have surged inland with catastrophic speed, consuming thousands of square miles of habitable land. For the people living there, The world they knew would have vanished in chaos and panic. What made the theory so unsettling was the timing. Researchers noticed possible connections between the proposed flood and the emergence of ancient flood legends across nearby civilizations. The Black Sea region stood near the crossroads of early human migration and developing agriculture. If a catastrophic flood truly devastated populations there, survivors may have carried the memory into Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and surrounding regions where flood narratives later became embedded in myth, religion, and oral tradition. Then came the underwater discoveries. Explorations beneath the Black Sea revealed ancient shorelines, submerged structures, and evidence that the region once looked radically different. Some researchers uncovered signs suggesting human activity existed far below modern sea level. While debates continue over the exact scale and speed of the flooding event, the evidence confirmed one undeniable fact. The ancient landscape had been drowned beneath massive rising waters. Critics argued that the flooding may have occurred more gradually than the catastrophic version proposed in documentaries and popular media. Other scientists challenged parts of the timeline and questioned whether the event alone could explain the flood myths spread across the world. But even with disagreement, the theory forced researchers to confront a disturbing possibility. Human civilization may preserve cultural memories of real prehistoric disasters far older than written history itself. And perhaps that is what makes the Black Sea theory so haunting. It does not require supernatural explanations to feel terrifying. It reveals how fragile early civilization truly was. Entire communities could vanish beneath sudden environmental collapse, while survivors carried trauma into future generations. Over centuries, those memories transformed into stories. Stories became legends. Legends became sacred warnings repeated across human history. But the deeper scientists investigated Earth's past, the more they realized the Black Sea event may have been only one chapter in a much larger catastrophe unfolding across the entire planet. Because near the end of the Ice Age, humanity faced environmental chaos on a scale modern civilization can barely imagine. The Ice Age apocalypse. Around 12,000 years ago, the Earth entered one of the most violent transitions in human history. Massive ice sheets that had covered huge portions of the planet for thousands of years began collapsing. Temperatures shifted unpredictably. Entire ecosystems transformed within generations. Sea levels rose. Animals vanished. Storms intensified. For ancient humans struggling to survive with primitive tools and scattered settlements, the world must have felt as though nature itself had turned against them. Then came the meltwater pulses. Gigantic reservoirs of glacial water burst into the oceans with astonishing speed, causing sea levels to rise dramatically over relatively short periods of time. Coastlines disappeared beneath advancing water, while rivers expanded into destructive torrents. Regions once inhabited by human communities were swallowed forever. Some scientists believe certain episodes may have raised sea levels so rapidly that people living near the coastlines could witness the ocean claiming the land within a single lifetime. Entire worlds vanished beneath the sea, while survivors fled inland, carrying memories of destruction. At the same time, another mystery emerged from the darkness of prehistory. Across North America and parts of Europe, enormous Ice Age animals suddenly disappeared. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and countless other species vanished during this chaotic period. Some researchers pointed toward climate change. Others suggested overhunting. But a more controversial theory proposed something even more catastrophic. Fragments of a comet or asteroid may have struck the Earth or exploded in the atmosphere, triggering fires, climate collapse, and environmental devastation across large regions of the planet. This period, often linked to the Younger Dryas event, remains one of the greatest mysteries in climate history. Evidence suggests temperatures suddenly plunged back into near-glacial conditions after an initial warming period. Massive wildfires may have spread across continents. atmospheric changes disrupted ecosystems already struggling to survive. Human populations faced conditions far harsher and more unstable than the relatively calm climate modern civilization depends upon today. Ancient humanity was not living through ordinary history. It was surviving planetary upheaval. What makes this terrifying is not only the scale of destruction, but the possibility that human memory preserved fragments of it. Floods, darkness, fire from the sky, civilizations erased, survivors rebuilding from catastrophe. Across myths and ancient traditions, these themes appear repeatedly as though humanity inherited emotional echoes from one of the most chaotic periods the planet had ever experienced. The stories may not preserve exact historical details, but they may preserve something far more powerful: the memory of fear itself. And as researchers continued uncovering evidence of sudden climate collapse, rising seas, and prehistoric destruction, one deeply unsettling question refused to disappear. If ancient humans truly witnessed environmental catastrophes capable of reshaping the world, how much of human history has already been erased? Because the greatest danger may not be that ancient civilizations exaggerated the flood. The greatest danger may be realizing they underestimated how fragile civilization really is. Why do these stories feel like warnings? There is something deeply unsettling about flood stories that goes beyond religion or mythology. Even today, thousands of years later, these ancient accounts still trigger a strange emotional reaction inside us: fear, vulnerability, collapse, the feeling that civilization itself can disappear far faster than we want to believe. That reaction may explain why humanity preserved these stories with such intensity across generations. They were not just tales about the past. They felt like warnings for the future. Ancient civilizations understood something modern society often forgets. Nature does not negotiate. Empires rise, believing themselves permanent, untouchable, protected by technology, wealth, and power. Then a drought begins. An earthquake strikes, the sea rises, a climate shifts. History is filled with civilizations that believed they stood at the center of the world moments before collapse consumed them. The flood stories carried that terrifying lesson through time. Human beings are never as invincible as they imagine. Many researchers now believe oral traditions can preserve memories far longer than previously thought. Indigenous cultures around the world have transmitted detailed knowledge across hundreds, sometimes thousands, of years without written language. Stories became survival systems. Dangerous places, vanished coastlines, environmental disasters, and sacred warnings were encoded into narratives so future generations would never forget them. Over time, facts blended with symbolism, spirituality, and fear until history transformed into myth. But hidden inside those myths, fragments of reality often remained. That may explain why flood narratives feel emotionally different from many other ancient legends. They carry trauma. The survivors in these stories are almost never triumphant heroes seeking glory. They are frightened witnesses escaping destruction while the world collapses around them. Again and again, humanity describes the same emotional experience: helplessness before overwhelming natural forces. The sea becomes more than water. It becomes judgment, chaos, death, and the terrifying reminder that civilization rests on fragile ground. Some historians argue that flood myths became powerful because water itself symbolizes rebirth and destruction across human psychology. Others believe the persistence of these stories reflects collective memories of real environmental catastrophes experienced near the end of the Ice Age. Perhaps both are true. Real disasters may have evolved into spiritual metaphors powerful enough to survive thousands of years. What began as survival memory slowly transformed into sacred warning, teaching each new generation that the world can change violently and without mercy. And maybe that is why these stories continue haunting humanity today. Deep beneath the myths, beneath the symbolism and religion, there remains a possibility difficult to ignore. Ancient civilizations may not have invented the fear of global catastrophe. They may have inherited it from survivors who watched their world disappear beneath rising water. And if humanity has already endured one planetary collapse in the distant past, then one final question becomes impossible to avoid. Could it happen again? The possibility that changes everything. Modern civilization lives with an unshakable belief that the world is stable. Cities rise toward the sky, satellites surround the planet. Technology gives humanity the illusion of control over nature itself. But the deeper scientists investigate Earth's past, the more fragile that confidence begins to look. Entire civilizations once stood where oceans now exist. Coastlines vanished, ecosystems collapsed. Human populations were forced to survive environmental disasters powerful enough to erase vast portions of the ancient world from memory. And perhaps that is the most disturbing part of this mystery. Not whether a single global flood happened exactly as ancient stories describe it, but the realization that humanity has repeatedly underestimated the destructive power of the planet it lives on. History is filled with forgotten collapses, cities buried beneath sand, kingdoms consumed by jungles, entire cultures erased so completely that only fragments of their existence remained. If smaller disasters could wipe civilizations from history, what would a true planetary catastrophe leave behind after thousands of years? The evidence surrounding ancient floods remains debated, controversial, and incomplete. Some discoveries fit accepted science. Others remain unresolved mysteries that continue dividing researchers, historians, and archaeologists. But one fact grows harder to dismiss. Near the end of the Ice Age, humanity lived through environmental chaos on a scale modern civilization has never experienced. Rising seas transformed continents. Megafloods reshaped landscapes. Entire regions disappeared beneath the ocean. The ancient world truly witnessed destruction capable of becoming legend. And legends survive for a reason. They carry emotional truth across generations long after facts become fragmented. Somewhere inside the flood myths repeated across thousands of years, humanity preserved the memory of terror, survival, and collapse. The stories endured because ancient people wanted future generations to remember what happens when nature overwhelms civilization, not as entertainment, as warning. Today, the oceans are rising once again. Climate instability increases across the planet. Earthquakes, storms, fires, and environmental disasters continue reminding humanity how little control it truly possesses. The modern world feels permanent only because most people have never witnessed civilization-level catastrophe. But ancient survivors may have understood something we struggle to accept. Stability is temporary. History can disappear. Entire worlds can vanish beneath water, ash, or ice, while future generations debate whether they ever existed at all. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether the flood happened. Perhaps the greatest mystery is how much of humanity's forgotten past still lies buried beneath the sea.